What is going on? No horsing around family. Zach Boyd back at it again, here to talk about all things Colts training camp, priming you guys, getting you ready for the preseason game one. Yes, we can actually talk about football now. No more hypotheticals. And to do that, you guys have been asking for this guy. You said, where's he been at? We love him. I said, you know what? Let me just go ahead and get a hold of him and see if we can't get him on. James Boyd of The Athletic, man. How you been?
I've been good. It was obviously great to meet you in person out at camp. That was a
Yeah.
good time. Obviously, camp is winding down a bit. We're more than halfway through. Get our first real taste of the action this Saturday at Buffalo. I won't be there in person. I'll be watching it on TV. However, it'll be fun to just evaluate, like you said, actual football. So I'm very excited for that.
Exactly. I guess we'll just kind of start right here and dive in. Topic number one. A little bit of buzz went out yesterday evening. As you well know, Kareem Hunt was coming to town for a visit. Looks like he walked away without any type of, contract. Sounds like, though, James, they did offer him something. Just both parties could not really meet in the middle when it comes to that. Just your initial thoughts on Kareem Hunt, pros, cons. How do you feel about the situation, and just a general overall thought of a Kareem Hunt potentially being an Indianapolis Colt?
Well, obviously, the first thing that comes to mind is, at least for me, was the assault back in 2018. You can't absolve him of that, or at least forget about it.
Yeah,
Now, I'm not one that says you can't, give a guy a second chance or whatever. Also, not a judge or a jury. So, I mean, you take that for what it's worth. You talk to the guy, you get to know him. You feel like if he can help your football team, maybe you go that route. I'm not in those meetings, and I can't judge him because I don't know him personally or his character. So I get all of that aspect, but from a purely football standpoint, I could see why the Colts were interested. He's a guy who is a bit more of I don't want to say a household name, but he has a little bit more cachet than like a Kenyon
sure.
Drake. I believe he's a pretty good third down option still because of the pass catching ability. And so, again, I can kind of see why the Colts would even entertain that. Even if JT was here and was healthy and was available and was playing, it kind of makes sense to at least look at him because of the Zach Moss injury more than anything else. And then also just his experience. So it wasn't like I was completely shocked that they looked at this guy. I know Chris Ballard in the past said he looked for, guys with high character, no character issues, things like that. But in sports, everything comes with a price, right? Like everything comes down to how talented you are at the end of the day, for better or worse. And so maybe teams, not only just the Colts, but a lot of teams are interested in this guy because of his talent and what he can do on the field. So I wasn't surprised either that he didn't walk away with the deal, just because there is, again, more interest around the league. So he's probably just weighing his options. Like, it's not out of the question that the Colts might be his eventual landing spot, but if I'm Kareem Hunt, I'm not, rushing into anything. I'm going to let everybody else tell me how much I'm worth and then go from there. So I think that's obviously a big factor. And then beyond that, you see that the Colts signed another running back today, I believe. Obviously not as high profile, but at the same time, it's someone who Shane Steichen is familiar with. Jason Huntley, he kind of knows him a little bit. The guy hasn't really done much in the NFL, but still another body that seems like it's something to reinforce, that running back room, which is depleted. We didn't get a chance to ask the other day about Deion Jackson. I'll make sure that we ask tomorrow, because with all these signings, it seems like, if this Deion Jackson injury or whatever the case may be is significant, then obviously that would be another blow to your running back room. So we'll see how it goes. But again, not surprised with the Kareem Hunt buzz, just because of his talent level and what he's proven he can do in the NFL.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons that I kind of connected the dots, and we talked about it yesterday on the podcast I did with Steven, was, Kareem Hunt's familiar being in a system with Nick Chubb, playing behind him. He knows what it's like to be in a system, in a dual back system, and still have a little bit of success. A guy who might give your football team a little bit more juice. Now, you want to take the off-field issues, and everybody deserves, their right to have their own stance when it comes to that. And I can understand either side, when it comes right down to it. For me, probably don't love it, but, at the end of the day, it is a business, and we probably live in a world where we should have, a little bit of compassion, redemption. People can change over a long period of time. So who knows, what his story is moving forward. But moving on to the guy who is no longer at the facility, we think, We don't know exactly where he's at,
He's on
but
the moon.
the man, the myth, the legend, Jonathan Taylor, as the saga continues. James, when you came in here, everybody probably told you, I know Kiefer and all them said, hey, this is a pretty good market. This is a pretty low key, everything's kind of chill.
They all
James
lied
Boyd
to
gets
me.
on the beat, and I mean, it is just the tornado has been going for 2 straight years. And I mean, my man, it has not stopped when it comes right down to it. Jonathan Taylor, just take it away, man. Just thoughts and just what the hell is going on right now.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you. I mean, I'm on JT watch every day, having a back and forth with Twitter. Okay, which hoodie he's going to wear today? Is it going to be blue or is it going to be black? It's usually black when he's outdoor, blue when he's indoor, jokes like that. But it is a thing. Like, it's on my checklist basically every day. I go in, you check to see where AR is, because obviously he's the franchise cornerstone, or they hope he can become that. So you check to see if he's there first and foremost. And then the other thing is like, okay, binoculars are out. Where's JT? And obviously earlier this week was the first time he wasn't there. He had been sidelined, but he just wasn't there at all. And up until, a couple of days ago, Shane Steichen hadn't really addressed JT anymore for about a week and a half. He just kind of shut it down. But he knew, I think the team knew, you weren't going to have to address this if he's just not there at all. And we weren't going to let him off the hook with the usual, oh, JT, nothing, I got nothing for you. Well, he's not here. So you got to have something to say. And so Shane Steichen declined to say whether he was on or off site. Stephen Holder reported that he was off site getting the ankle treatment done. Shane Steichen did at least confirm that it's an ankle. Because remember, like a couple weeks ago, we asked what he's on the PUP list for. What is he physically unable to do or perform because of? And he wouldn't say. I think his words were something like, he's just dealing with something right now amid the back reports and stuff like that. He did at least confirm that it's an ankle. So it's a little bit more information than we had before. But then it kind of just spins me for a loop because I'm like, okay, if it's the ankle, why in the world would he ever ask for an extension or more money or expect that if his ankle is that hurt? This is the same ankle that, or at least ankle procedure that EJ Speed got during this offseason. He's back playing. He's fine. That was according to Nate Atkins of the Indy Star. So I don't understand what's going on with the ankle. But then on the flip side, I'm like, okay, could this be another reason to hold in without getting fined? And so it's all very confusing to me. It is a bit redundant, but it has to be because he's your best player. So it's not like, he can just not be around and we don't ask about it. So, I mean, in a way, I feel sorry for Shane Steichen because he's the main Colts figure that has to answer for this stuff. But every single day we have to ask about JT, even if you're going to say the same thing, because we don't know if that one day that we don't ask is the one day that something changes. And so that's kind of where I'm at. But I will say this. We're more than halfway through camp. He has not participated in a team activity since the surgery happened in January. The games aren't getting further away. They're getting closer. So to me, the rubber meets the road week 1. If he's not here by week 1, then what do we make of that? And then at that point too, if he's around in the locker room and all that, guess who's going to ask him questions? Us.
Yeah.
It's not like he's going to be some ghost and like we're going to let him walk past and never actually talk to the guy. We will talk to the Colts PR staff and say, hey, we got to talk to this guy. Locker rooms are open now. He's got to speak. Best player on the team, disgruntled player, you want it out. Even if everything he says isn't true or not really that authentic or that not really that eye-opening, he has to talk. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. Like, until he talks or practices, then there's not really anything else to like report, although he continues to grab headlines every day because of how good he is.
Yeah, 100%. Guys, Wyatt Law, Jeff Black, Colton Lombardo, all the usuals are in here. Mikey's in here. Dylan's in here as well. Thank you guys so much for hopping on.
No Wilkins on the roster anymore.
No, Jordan Wilkins not there anymore. Colton, we're going to get to your question here in a minute. As soon as we get past this segment, I promise you I haven't forgot you, my man. just to kind of piggyback a little bit on the thoughts on, I think the one question everybody in the know in my circle said, the one question I want you to ask everybody, James and, Holder, Kevin Bowen, while you're down there on the field with that access, are they tired of the Jonathan Taylor? And I'm like, I don't need to ask them. Of course they're tired of it, but it's the diligence of the job, right? Like you wouldn't be doing the job if you weren't asking those questions.
Yeah. And I'm not tired of it because at the same, I feel like it's just, again, a checklist for me.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm going in and I'm mad every day, like, oh my God, I got to ask about JT. It's just like, okay, well, I got to ask about JT. Like, would I prefer to use my 1 or 2 questions to Shane Steichen something else? Of course. But at the same time, you have to do it. And I think that it's more so the fans that are tired of it because, quite frankly, my job doesn't really change whether JT plays or not. The product itself changes, but the work doesn't. If anything, it would be easier for my job if he just showed up and played because obviously we know trade requests and pup lists and hold-ins, holdouts, reading through the CBA like I did, those things make the job harder. But I'm not really like bothered by it at all. I think it's just a fascinating thing because to me, as we've said the last time I talked to you here on the pod, there's just not much leverage. There isn't any leverage, in my opinion. I read through the CBA for a day and a half and all the legal jargon, and all of it basically pointed to the fact that the Colts own his rights. And so I just don't see how he could have any type of way of getting out from underneath this contract unless, Jim Irsay conceded and said, you know what, we are going to trade you, which is still a possibility, but I don't think it's going to be a possibility before we see the guy actually be quote unquote healthy. So that's where I'm at. I'm just very fascinated by the whole thing because it's like, how can you really be hurt and still ask for money? That doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I don't understand how you could feel justified getting an extension if you're not even healthy. Like, you're coming off a season where you weren't healthy and you're still not healthy. So I don't know what it is, how true it is, how false it is. I mean, it just is a very, very weird dynamic and something that I have never experienced before. And Chap hasn't experienced it. Holder, Kiefer, nobody has. So we're kind of all going through this together. And it's been something that continues to grab headlines because of the talent level. Again, if this guy wasn't as talented, nobody would be going through all this every single day. I mean, there's guys that miss practice every day. But we're not asking about them because they're lower depth chart guys. We have to ask about JT because when he's healthy, he's one of the best players in franchise history.
Yeah, I mean, and this is layered. I mean, layer on top of layer on top of layer.
Oh,
and
yeah,
just
it's like a mystery movie.
A lot of confusion. Yeah, it's just a lot of conspiracies, a lot of hypotheticals. I'd like to just see the result be at the end of the day, you know what, cooler heads prevail. Go back out there, play football, be Jonathan Taylor that he's always been, and the man's going to get paid by somebody. I don't know if it's even going to be us, but he'll get paid by somebody just by doing that.
So, Zach, we were having this talk earlier today on 107.5 The Fan. What if, and I'm not saying this in a rude way, I mean this just honestly, what if the franchise tag for running backs, at least high-level running backs, becomes sort of your biggest payday? So in a sense, I'm like, you might want to come back and prove how good you are. That way you can get tagged for a year and make, I think next year on the tag in 2024, the running back tag will be like $13 million. Yeah. $13 million guaranteed. Sounds pretty high considering what you've seen other guys sign for over like 4 and 5 year deals who don't get tagged. So in my mind, I'm like, at some point you got to kind of have that come to Jesus moment where it's like, man, I understand how good I am, my value, but I'm never going to be valued at the level that I personally think so. So maybe my consolation is to go out here and prove how good I am, and either get tagged or find a way to go somewhere else. But the bottom line is, at least in my eyes, is I'm thinking to myself, okay, the Colts don't want to extend you right now. If you come out and ball out, then they might tag you next year. They haven't used the tag in like a decade, but they might use it on you. And maybe that is your biggest payday. Maybe that is your only chance to cash in. Is it fair? Maybe not, but it'll be reality. And so I think they have to kind of look at it from that standpoint where, like, man, being tagged is like my one big payday. And then the rest of it is just trying to, get in where I fit in, where you see guys like, Dalvin Cook and Kareem Hunt and other players kind of float around the league and kind of pick up whatever money they can with different teams.
Yeah, I mean, it might be kind of why Saquon had kind of come to that determination. Hey, I'm on this contract. They're going to give me a little bit of a bump, and this might be the best opportunity for me to make a large sum of money as a running back. not saying it's fair, but at the end of the day, that's the business, man. I mean,
Yeah.
you hate it, but it's just, I mean, at one point, cornerbacks weren't getting paid very much, and now
How do fullbacks feel? They don't
yeah,
exist anymore.
yeah. It's just it's rough. It's rough. There's no doubt about it. More to come on that, guys. I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to talk. I did want to get to Colton's question because he had a good one. Question for James. I've been pounding the table since the new league year. Why haven't we signed a right guard? The depth looks atrocious. Same story as last season, in my opinion. James, just your thoughts on the right guard position. Are you a little bit surprised that that we didn't go out there and sign a veteran? I'm not so sure that we won't at some point. I think it's more of we want to see what we have with these young guys and then go from there.
Yeah, I am a bit surprised because I'm like, man, you all did this last year and you saw how it turned out. And we all saw Matt Ryan's comments from earlier this week, which I believe was kind of overblown. I think when you read the actual story, he's like, the entire experience of going from Atlanta to the Colts was, an S show, not just his Colts experience, which I think kind of got lost in translation. But nevertheless, yes, I've been pounding the table myself. Like, why are you handing the job to Will Fries at right guard?
Yeah.
He might be the guy. He might prove to be that, but I'm like, where is the real competition that you probably wanted throughout training camp that you're not getting right now? So the only real change, as someone else pointed out, Mikey, is Tony Soprano Jr. And he does seem legit. I talked to him. I actually got a story coming out on him this week before the preseason game begins, so y'all can check that out pretty soon. But he talked about, having to be tougher and things like that. But I'm like, man, at some point, you can only do so much with the same group.
Yeah.
So I'm like, this guy's either a magician or it's going to backfire. So obviously the Colts hope that he can pull it off. And he sounds very confident, but I think this weekend will be the first true test of us seeing what that offensive line is about, if they can sort of be revamped, revitalized. But yes, I do think that it's a bit concerning that right guard spot was never really addressed. And then even beyond that, I understand maybe why not, because they gave so much money to Quentin Nelson already, Ryan Kelly already, Braden Smith already, that they're like maybe hesitant to invest more money into that offensive line. But as we all know, the biggest investment is Anthony Richardson.
Sure.
If you don't protect him, I mean, what are we doing? What are you doing? So I think that that's a huge, huge factor in his development, is just having the opportunity to survive behind the offensive line. And if he can't, Lord have mercy. So I see Wyatt saying, Shane Steichen spoke glowingly about Serrano. Yes, he would not speak badly about him because he hired him, right? So you just don't know. I mean, all these coaches were spoken about in glowing manners when they started. So I'm not rooting for the guy to fail, obviously, but I'm just saying the same thing was probably said about Chris Strasser when he was the offensive line coach, when the Colts hired him under the Frank Reich regime. So again, it's one of those things where I just think that it's a huge, huge risk to run that same offensive line out there. But if you're right, hey, I'll eat all the crow. But if you are wrong, I don't have to get on you. The Twitter world, all of you as fans, will let them know how wrong they got it.
And if you're Chris Ballard, knowing what you went through last year, just with how bad the offensive line was, and you had the same approach, you come out. It to me says Ballard really thinks it was about coaching and it wasn't about necessarily the personnel. Right. But am I going to gamble my general manager career on Will Fries as a right guard? I don't know if I'm comfortable doing that, but it's a crazy world that there's only 32 jobs in the NFL that you get to be a general manager.
Yeah.
And it's one of the few jobs that very rarely do you get to do it again. A coaching carousel kind of cycles through. You usually get another try. Frank Reich fired in midseason. He gets another try next season. General managers, it's normally a one and done. I'm not going to say it never happens, but typically it's my man Braylon Kelly says French fries. They got that backup as Wesley French. So yeah, French fries. As we all saw the memes last year when it come to that. James.
Oh, and real quick, to Wyatt's point, I do agree. The offensive line was better at the end of last year. I'm just saying that maybe a little more competition in camp would like quell the worries a bit.
I would
That's my only thing. But I do admit that they looked way better in like the last 5 games of the year than they did at the beginning when they were rotating a bunch of guys in and out. But to that point, I believe what was it, the second to last game of the year was the one against the Giants where they had the Snow Angels and all that, and everyone was like, "Where's the Colts' toughness?" When Kayvon, did that to Nick Foles and all that. So I do think that is an area beyond just personnel and scheme wise that I would be shocked to see under Tony Soprano Jr. Just that lack of toughness. That's something that he definitely wants to make sure that they have this season.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question about that. Guys, thank you so much for all the comments. We're going to try to get to some of those as we go down the line. I know it's kind of this weird thing that we do now in the NFL, James. We do an and or, at the starting.
Oh yeah,
whoever decided to do
what
that,
is this?
It's genius. I mean, I guess if you don't really want to answer the question and or, because ultimately at the end of the day, you got to play somebody, and I guess maybe why would you do it in the preseason? I get it in the regular season, a little bit of gamesmanship going on right there, but I think whoever comes out and takes the reps with the ones tomorrow, because that's basically dress rehearsal, will be the one who eventually starts in that game. What say you?
I think QB1 Saturday will probably be Gardner Minshew just because of him starting off, at least throughout camp, as the QB1. But I am leaning probably as heavily as I've been throughout the offseason towards Richardson being QB1 for actual week one. I think how you evaluate Saturday's preseason game is just based off of the amount of time Richardson gets. I'd probably pay him for a half. In my opinion, I would make it the first half. Like I would start him, by the weekend, but they've continued to rotate a bunch. And so it just feels like I wouldn't be shocked if they try to Gardner Minshew out there to start and then kind of ease Richardson in, whether it's against the second string guy or something like that in the second quarter or the second half. But to me, play the young guy, play him as often as you can. I'll probably give him a half, at least one full quarter to kind of get, that real live rep experience of guys coming to hit you and not really caring about your safety and things like that. So, and then also just factoring in that they're going to have the joint practices against the Bears and Philly. So how much are you going to see him in those last 2 preseason games as opposed to that first one? So that's where I'm at. I want to see the young guy play as much as possible. Doesn't really matter to me who starts the preseason week one, but I do think that week one regular season will be Anthony Richardson, just because I feel like the lead Gardner Minshew might have had throughout camp is kind of tapered off to the point where he's still the most consistent guy overall, higher completion percentage, but all of the wow factor plays, all of the eye-popping plays come from Anthony Richardson, whether it's running or throwing. And to me, that kind of evens the playing field where, if the only guy who's making the dynamic down the field plays is your rookie, then, you saw kind of that dink and dunk offense that you had last year with Matt Ryan. That's kind of what we're seeing with Gardner Minshew. I saw Dalton Brisner's name and I got kind of confused, but Gardner Minshew, he's like very underneath a lot of his throws throughout camp. Nothing ever goes really too much down the field, where Anthony Richardson has that ability to air it out a bit, make somebody miss, those types of things that I think you need to just exploit more throughout the preseason and eventually in the regular season. So again, don't know who's going to start preseason. Maybe we'll find out tomorrow when we ask Shane Steichen. However, I do think that the week one starter will be Anthony Richardson.
I would agree 100%. I mean, I was down there Sunday, and that was probably his best day of training camp. I mean, he was lighting things up, a lot of good throws, hit Alec Pierce, had the one to Pittman.
He was balling.
Man, he really, really looked good. It's just, I mean, you mentioned the wow plays. That's the thing that Gardner Minshew's never really going to provide, and that's just not his game. That's not how he's been. And I think with a guy who has so little experience playing football in general, I think a lot of people say, well, he has no NFL experience. He really doesn't have a lot of football experience. He didn't play a lot of games in college, even high school. If you track back, I mean, he was always kind of in that line of command, and he always worked his way up and earned that job. I think you got to go out there and get him live bullets. I don't really care as much about, turning the football over, working on that timing. I care more about him getting comfortable, because from everything that I've seen, James, his relationship with Shane Steichen has been pretty good. Love to hear you speak on that and just that relationship and how that's been and what you've witnessed as you've been down there at training camp this year.
Yeah, their relationship seems really good. And I think part of that is just the maturity for Anthony Richardson. He doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. He makes a good play. He'll react, but it's not like it's his first time ever making a play. And then if he makes a mistake, you'll see a reaction, but he's not like he's going to just sulk the entire rest of the practice. Even when he had his best day, I thought this past Sunday, he was lighting it up. He almost threw a pick to Shaq Leonard in 7-on-7 early in practice. Yeah. And he responded by, going out in 11-on-11 and throwing 3 touchdown passes and having a 2-point conversion on like this drive that they need to have during this like last minute scenario. So again, I think that his maturity helps the relationship with Shane Steichen. And then Shane Steichen is, basically saying this is a guy who continues to ask questions, continues to bug, all of us to try to get better. And I think he really enjoys that because he's a football guru at heart. So when you have a young guy who's constantly asking questions, who's constantly bugging you, I don't think that Shane Steichen is like buggable. I don't think there's ever going to be a point in time where Anthony Richardson could like get on his nerves.
Yeah.
I feel like you could text Shane Steichen at like 3 a.m. about a protection. He'll be like responding right away because that's the kind of coach he is. So their relationship seems really, really good so far. And I think that a lot of the guys are gravitating towards that. The only reason we might not get as much colorful descriptions of Steichen is because he's been, at least Michael Pittman said, he's kind of told them, hey, don't talk too much about scheme, what's going on, whatever. So maybe that's a little bit why he seems so shielded. But it seems like he has an overall command of that team, command of the quarterback room, command of Anthony Richardson. And there's a mutual respect there where they both trying to work towards this similar goal, this obvious goal of him becoming the face of the franchise. So, he's been very, Shane Steichen, that is, he's been very cautious and, meticulous about how he talks about Anthony Richardson. None of the franchise QB talk, none of the QB1 talk, none of that stuff. But he has talked about, how Anthony every single day is making strides to get better. And it's not just during practice. Like he's making sure that he's locked into the playbook and he's asking a ton of questions, basically all times of the day and around the clock.
Yeah, I mean, and that relationship's so vital. And I guess that's why I was so pro offensive minded head coach, because your offensive head coach is going to be with that young quarterback for a very, very long time, or you hope, right? Because, I mean, they're kind of locked together as far as their success goes. As the quarterback goes, the coach will go as well. It'll be interesting. Now, James, the first official depth chart came out yesterday. I put absolutely this much stock into the first depth chart just because, they got to put something on paper, right, James? Like they don't really have a great idea. Anything stand out to you? It was pretty much as expected. I did like the fact that, I guess it would be DJ Baker, as Zaire Franklin reminded us that you don't.
Yeah, I got clown for that.
DJ Baker and then Dallas Flowers out there at cornerback. Anything else? I mean, that kind of stood out to you as far as the depth chart? As far as I think pretty much status quo, right? Like, I mean, pretty much what you expected. I believe I personally like the fact that they didn't just go ahead and give Juju, and rush the starting positions. They're easing them back in. They haven't really been at camp. And how do you make them a starter when you practice 3 or 4 times, and just give them that job? Plus, I mean, DJ Baker, for all intents and purposes, has been a real competitor in this camp. And for me, it's very evident he is there to make this football team, no doubt about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that was definitely a part of the depth chart that stood out to me. It was like, okay, Dallas Flowers, Darrell Baker Jr., DJ, as Zaire Franklin told me. That makes sense because they have been the main guys just health-wise throughout camp. And while I feel like Dallas has kind of tapered off, DJ has really played well. I have to give him credit. Like, I understand that he's undrafted and people might have their opinions about him, but the guy has played really, really well. Stay tuned. I'll have more on him and his background coming, I believe, early next week. So love a good underdog story. Why not do it right
Absolutely.
now? Or waiting for things to kind of happen. But as far as, the draft picks, Darius Rush has had his moments. But Juju, I must say, he's been in practice for like 2 or 3 days, and he's made some plays already where I'm like, okay, yeah, this guy,
Yeah.
he could be a starter by week 1. Like that's kind of how I'm feeling. His first practice, he was kind of just getting his legs underneath him. But that second one, which was outdoor, man, he put a hit on Evan Hull. That was not like dirty or anything like that. He just kind of cracked him. And I was like, okay, like this guy
Yeah.
isn't afraid of contact. He's certainly eager to put it out there. And then he had a very like great pass breakup at the last second on Ashton Doolin, where he like raked the ball out of his hand going to the ground. He had another good PBU the other day when I was out there. So he's a guy who's just been around the ball, and he looks so much bigger in person
Yes.
than you would see. Yeah, I mean, we talked about that, right? I was like, man, this guy is like, looks like a
Huge.
transformer or something. He's a
Yeah.
big dude. And so you see the size, the length, and then just the recovery skills. And it makes you think like, okay, if he continues to show this, it's going to be very, very, very hard to not give him an opportunity. I think for him, it's all about making sure that he stays healthy. Like that's my biggest thing is like, okay, him and Rush, we're kind of dinged up to start training camp. Can you get through the rest of this, preseason activity healthy, and then obviously stay healthy throughout the season? Because if he does, I don't see there's going to be any situation where he doesn't eventually assume that starting role on the outside, whether it's by week 1, week 4, whatever. But he's been a guy that I've been very impressed with in a short amount of time, because I was wondering like, okay, would he be rusty or whatever? But nah, not much rust, man. It's a lot of I feel like angst to go out there and hit somebody. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to see him this weekend because that'll be his first time being in a real game. And he also handles the spotlight, it seems like, very well, being the hometown kid and all of that. Doesn't let it get to his head at all. And is very confident, very, very, very confident, which
Yeah.
is all, defensive backs ever. They'll tell you they're the next Darrelle Revis every single one.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for him. But also, I think it's good for the Colts in general to have that competition because they are super thin. And so when you see a guy like DJ Baker step up and you see Juju Brents come back and immediately step up, you're probably, if you're Chris Ballard, you're probably thinking like, yeah, this is exactly what I want, because you want these guys to push each other and not make it so it's like very, very obvious who should be starting. Like you want that competition and that confidence too, to know that if a guy goes down or if you want to just get a guy in for a few plays, or if there's like a defensive scheme you want, you can put him out there and feel like he's going to make a play.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm glad you mentioned it. I don't think people on here, unless they've seen him in person, I don't think they realize how big Juju is. I mean, he is just literally, he is long. He is, I
Yeah,
mean,
man.
he's different. I mean, he is different. I mean, when you look at his build, you can see how the Colts, did fall in love with those things, in those traits, as well. As Bray said, they drafted some long, athletic corners.
They
And
did. And if you
ain't no
hit
doubt
on
about it.
if you hit on both of them, Rush and Brents, I mean, my goodness, you have your tandem for years to come.
Yep.
Even if you just hit on one of them, I mean, that's a huge plus for you. And not to mention that Kenny Moore, which I wrote about earlier this week, he's been balling. So I'm like, if you get like Pro Bowl caliber Kenny Moore in the slot and you get a couple guys on the outside, like, yes, their defense, I think, will still be very, very, very young on the back end and obviously very inexperienced and very vulnerable. But for the things that they've kind of put into that unit, as far as, not really going out and get a veteran guy after the Isaiah Rodgers suspension and stuff like that, I mean, that's what you would expect. I think at this point, you're looking for them to gain experience and then for Kenny Moore to bounce back, because he said he wants to be here in Indianapolis. And so I'm excited to see what he does Saturday as well.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Now, as far as Shaq Leonard, do you have any expectations in this first preseason game? I think probably. I don't envision him playing in that first preseason game, but you're down there, you're around it more. Just your thoughts on him overall, because I think he's really been a bright light in camp. We didn't expect that he would be out there and be playing to this point, at this point.
Yeah, I didn't expect it, I'll be honest.
It's crazy. But that being said, just what are your expectations as far as him playing this first preseason game and then to double back, just how it's been seeing him out there on the field? Because I know last year you didn't get a lot of those chances, to see a happy Shaq Leonard. So curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, Shane Steichen was asked directly, I believe it was by Kevin Bowen, like, is Shaq going to play in the preseason game? He was like, we're still checking on that. I think he's like the one player that you probably don't, expect to see that's a veteran, that's fully healthy. just
Yeah.
because of all he's been through. They're still working him back in, even though he's fully healthy. He's on a pitch count, and it just doesn't make sense in my eyes to rush him back out there for a preseason game. I would much rather, even if he doesn't play at all throughout the preseason, and all you do is like use those joint practices to prepare him, that's fine too. We'll have plenty of evaluations on that, but I don't expect to see him out there Saturday at all. It seems too premature and kind of like, to me, like high risk, low reward. Like, why put him
Yeah.
out there for a preseason
Yep.
game when you're trying to make sure that his back and everything with the nerves and the leg is all 100% ready to go? Because, like I said, he's fully healthy, but he's not a full go just yet. He's still on pitch count, throughout practice and stuff like that. But overall, his intensity, his joy, his passion has been evident. He's flying around, getting his hand on the ball. Like I said, he was very mad that he dropped a pick from Anthony Richardson. But I'm sure when that first interception or that first fumble recovery or forced fumble happens, whether it's, during camp, preseason, regular season, that's going to be a big moment for him. And obviously during the regular season, it'll be huge just because of all he's been through. But I think that he's a guy who could bounce back this year. He looks healthy. He sounds confident. He sounds like, a guy who's sure of himself, which was not the case, back when we talked to him throughout the offseason. So excited for him. And it's been cool to see him bounce back because, as I've said all along, Shaq loves football. And I think he loves it more than people really know how to quantify because they're just not him. Like, I'm not even him, so I couldn't tell you how much he really loves it. But I know it hurt him a lot when people were kind of doubting his rehab process and how much he actually wanted to be back out there, because this is a dude that went through a ton to make sure that he could be available this season. And if he could come back and be who he once was, oh man, like, I'm excited to see that, because I haven't seen, peak Shaq and how much of a game changer that can be outside of a few highlights. So I'm excited for that, even just from a personal standpoint. I know I'm the reporter, but you want to report on players, playing to their highest level, to their capabilities. And obviously when he's at his highest level, he's one of the best players, offense, defense, whatever, in the NFL.
Yeah, and that's the reason he got the name the Maniac, because he just does things that are just crazy on the football field. So super excited just to see him out there, see that joy. And when he's out there and when he's clicking, he really is the spirit and the life, the lifeblood of that defense, and they just feed off of him. So great to see that. James, anybody at camp this so far early on in camp that's kind of stood out to you, maybe a young guy or even a veteran guy, that you think, hey, I know you mentioned Kenny Moore earlier, he's had a really nice bounce back camp. Anybody in particular that you've had your eye on and said, hey, give me a second here. I need to look at this guy a little bit more in depth.
Nick Cross. I think Nick Cross has had some really solid days as of late throughout camp. Getting more opportunity because Rodney Thomas was out with the toe. Julian Blackmon hasn't practiced in a while because of the hamstring. So he's getting more reps. And, I was asking Gus Bradley about him. I was like, hey, what do you think about just his, maturity level? Because Gus Bradley said one of the reasons why he didn't really latch on last year was because he just wasn't as dialed in throughout like the walkthroughs, the meetings, and not like he was like pouting or anything like that. He just wasn't, as detailed as maybe he should have been. And again, he was 21. He's going to be 22 here soon. And so seeing him throughout camp, he's much more attentive for what the coaches are saying, and it's translated to the field. And they've also added more to his plate where he's, kind of moving around. He's become this very versatile piece for them where he can play free safety, strong safety, or nickelback. And so I think that when Gus Bradley kind of revealed that, it was very eye-opening and kind of, proved his point of this guy's paying attention, because obviously you're not going to put all of that on the plate of someone who doesn't study or doesn't want to be great or want to be an asset wherever he's put. So I think that he's had a pretty good camp as of late, filling in for a couple of guys that are banged up. And to me, with Julian Blackmon still, nursing the hamstring, Nick is someone who could possibly contend for a starting spot on that back end at strong safety with a guy like, Rodney Thomas, assuming the toe injury isn't that big of a deal. He can come back and be that starting free safety. So Nick Cross is probably my pick for a guy who has really stood out to me as of late, beyond all the other ones that we already know about. But I think that he's someone who could definitely have some impact. And again, sort of grow up with that back end secondary. We talk about like the front guys and Grove and Buck and Tyquan Lewis and Samson Ebukam and all these guys, like, proven guys and veterans, but that back end is very, very young, and where, that can be an issue, obviously, in the NFL, but it also can be, a benefit if a young guy is able to go back there and succeed like a Rodney Thomas did last year, and then you have sort of like your back end tandem set up for years to come.
Yeah, I mean, and Nick Cross was a very young kid last year, a lot thrown on him. And then when you got a veteran like a Rodney McLeod coming in, that's very hard for anybody to win that job. Rodney was probably one of the few bright spots of our football team last year.
He balled last year.
Very consistent. And I was glad to see him get another contract and get to continue his playing career as well. If it's week one, and I'm gonna put the head coaching, cap on you real quick, James, and I'm gonna say, who is the starting running back if Jonathan Taylor is out of the equation? Like, they just don't have a lot of options right now. Like who are you rolling with as the guy that you're putting back there? Who do you trust the most? And for me, the reaction on your face alone lets me know that maybe you got to go out there and explore. And that's why they're having guys come in.
Yeah, because I'm like, obviously the default answer would be Zach Moss, but he broke his arm on the first day of padded practice.
Yeah.
So, of the guys they have on the roster right now, I don't even know if Deion Jackson is healthy. So maybe Evan Hull, he's been getting the first team reps, but obviously that's not something you want to do right off the bat, and why you want to go out there and get somebody. But ideally, I guess you would say Deion Jackson, assuming his injury isn't major. He's a guy who filled in for JT last year, has some of that pass catching up capability that would help, throughout the passing game, and is someone who is pretty low maintenance, and can produce for you. It's proven to be a viable option. So that would be my answer there. But again, we don't know the extent of his injury, and I'm hoping to get more clarity on that tomorrow, just because if he's going to be out for a while, then it's really thin. And as much as you want your young guys to get reps, it would be quite a nightmare for the Colts if they start week one with a rookie quarterback and a rookie running back back there in Evan Hull. That would be something, and definitely not what they signed up for.
Not what you want, for sure. Injury report real quick. Anything? I know you mentioned a couple things. Deion Jackson. What the heck's going on with Mo Alley-Cox and Jelani Woods? I know they've been out for a bit. You think this is more cautionary, or you think there's actually some real concern with one of those guys?
I think it's probably real concern with both. Not like, career ending or nothing like that, but just you're going to miss some time, because before we knew about Mo Alley-Cox's ankle injury, the Colts signed a bunch, like 2 more tight ends, and we're all like, why the heck are they signing all these tight ends? Don't they have them? No, they don't, because they're hurt. And so Will Mallory's been out with the hamstring. Jelani's been out with the hamstring. He hasn't practiced in forever, it seems like. Mo Alley-Cox just went down with an ankle. He's missed, I think, 2 or 3 straight practices. And so that's definitely something that you have to keep an eye on, and it's very concerning. But to me, the biggest injury update / concern outside of JT is Buck. Buck has been out the last 3 practices, I think, with a foot injury. He's been there every single day. Seems to be in good spirits. No one's really panicking. And Buck plays through a ton of pain. Did it last year, so I'm not too concerned. However, feet are tricky. And so I'm like, okay, anytime I hear about a foot, I'm like, oh, it's a lot of pressure for a big man on, your lower joints. So you hope that he can become fully healthy by season start, and he's not starting the year having to fight through injuries like he did towards the end of last year. Like, of course, you're going to get dinged up throughout football, but you want to start the season, obviously, as healthy as you can be. So we'll see.
Yeah, man, it should be interesting. And I wouldn't get too wrapped up in the injuries. Very precautionary right now. I think as you go through training camp, however, and even into the preseason, if this festers on, then you do have something to worry about. And you obviously, telltale sign, you put a guy on, get him out of practice, and you immediately sign a position. There's something going on there.
Exactly.
So it should be interesting. James, before we let you go, man, what you working on? What you out there doing? Let everybody know what to be looking out for you out there at The Athletic, because you do a great job.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Like I said, stay tuned for a story on Tony Sperano Jr., just his expectations of the team, his coaching style, his relationships that he's built with certain guys on the front line. So stay tuned for that. I would say stay tuned this weekend for sort of a preview of the Colts Bills game, just looking at, guys who could have the most to gain or lose by performing well and not performing well this upcoming Saturday, and obviously the recap of Saturday, what we see, assuming that Anthony Richardson makes his debut. Spoiler alert, my lead to whatever notebook I write, whatever list I have, the first thing will be him. So stay tuned for that. And then also just going forward, more perspective on JT from different people around the league, people that I think you all really respect and appreciate just kind of hearing from while we wait for the other shoe to drop with him. But other than that, man, I'm just excited for the season and to finally have actual film and data and highlights to break down and to assess rather than, me tweeting something out and then everyone on Twitter asking me for the video or what happened. Like, I would love to show you, but now we get to all watch it together.
Yeah. It'll be really cool. Also, the podcast is up and going again, huh?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Shout out to Jim Aiello, former Colts reporter for Indy Star. He's now my editor at The Athletic. He's also a true team player. So he volunteered. He didn't have to as my editor because he's not only editing, Colts stuff. He's doing like Bengals stuff and helping out, I believe, with like the Giants stuff. So there's always some other stuff on his plate, but he's taking time every week to do the podcast with me. So you can check that out as well. And it's been fun so far to have somebody else to banter with and kind of get that out there. I know people have been asking me. And so I will continue to make all the rounds. I'll come on, no horsing around as much as, you'll have me. But I also know that, for everyone wondering, the podcast will still be out there. The only thing is we're going through some staff changes right now on our audio side. So it might be a while before we get the name change official and the new R. But it will be in your feed pretty much every Monday or Tuesday going forward.
Cool, man. More to come and looking forward to that. Guys, if you haven't already had a chance, like, rate, review, share, and subscribe. Join this No Horsing Around family as we're now up over 2.7 thousand followers and subscribers. Thank you so much for doing that. I've always said this from the very beginning. We appreciate every single interaction that you guys have with us. And this podcast is because of you. We just are lucky enough to be able to use our voices and talk Colts football, follow our passion. And as always, guys, until next time, we'll see you next Wednesday on the live stream.